that you will most commonly use, such as creating the database, selecting information, inserting information, updating information, deleting information, creating tables, modifying those tables, and deleting an entire table. Now, today we are going to expand on this, not necessarily on SQL syntax, but we're actually going to write some more LUA code to showcase how you can, instead of having to provide your users or let's say um, be running SQL queries on any server that you install your script, we can do this automatically, and we'll also explain some of the most common MySQL, which is one of the most used libraries in FiveM, some of those functions, and we'll expand just a little bit on command line interface by installing Git. So before anything, does anybody have any questions from last class or anything that might have just stuck in there? No?
No.
No.
Okay, very good. Let's go ahead. This is today's markdown. As usual, I have some pre-written information and some will just complete as we go. So let me just render this real quick. Um, so as I said today, we'll be expanding on database a little bit, databases. And the first thing I would like to start with is the connection string. Now, this is nothing complicated. This is nothing to talk much about. It's just a simple string that you can set up in your server config just like this and be able to connect to your database on FiveM. Now, this is composed of username. Oh, yes, I keep forgetting about that. How about now?
Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, this is composed of a username divided by a colon, password at to symbolize the location of the MySQL server. So this can be directly your public server's IP, for example, 178, this and that, right? Just an IP address. Or this can also be a local host, depending on where you have your database. And I just wanted to point out really quick before we start moving to the other stuff. MySQL usually runs in port 3306, so just make sure that you look for this port. If you don't have a password, which is absolutely not recommended, but you can just remove the password and the colon. So something like this should be able to connect. Yeah, but it is absolutely never advised to do this. Never. Unless it's in your local computer and it's not exposed to the internet. All right, so let's see very hold on, give me just 1 second. Let's see very quickly, just for future reference, because the document will always be available to review. I might add some links now to the documentation for each, but basically we have the following that you will see on multiple scripts. Do you let it? Yes, always default port. Because the thing is that um, with one MySQL server, you can have infinite databases. Now, if you want to change the port because you want to have two different instances on the same server or the same machine, for example, for whatever reason, then yeah, you can. Or you could use Docker, which is a topic I've been thinking of talking about later on. So yeah, some of the functions that you guys will see across different scripts: fetch scalar, fetch all, execute. Those are some of the most common ones. Why are these used and when? Well, first of all, we're gonna be seeing fetch scalar. Execute, we saw it on the last class when we used execute to store information regarding the VIP system and the users redeeming of the tier. I'll also provide the link again to that. If anybody doesn't have it. So getting started, fetch scalar, its main purpose is to retrieve a single value, also referred to as a scalar, from the database. Now, when do you want to use this? and we will see it, ideal for queries where you need only one piece of data. Example, account, a single config value. So giving more practical examples, you want to fetch a single column of a single row. You want to say, okay, um, I'm giving you, for example, user ID. A query where you would use it would be select all from users, for example, where user ID equals 10, for example, something like this. It will return a single value. Wait, actually not this. You would have to select a specific column. So if you want to select, for example, inventory or something like this, from users where the user ID equals 10. So you want one value. Same if you are using the count statement just to return a number, and that's the one we're going to be using today. You can use fetch all, which retrieves all rows returned by a query. Now, when do you want to use it? You use it when you expect multiple rows of data. So, for example, you are fetching the entire, let me just copy this real quick and add it right here. Let's say you're now selecting this. You're selecting all users. Now, you're expecting multiple rows of data. This will not be just one row of users. Then you can use fetch all and just, of course, you give it select all from users, callback, etc. We're going to see that in practice in a few moments. Um, Let me actually delete this so it doesn't cause any confusions. So now the benefits of this one is when you're dealing with a lot of data, so also refers to comprehensive data, it returns an array or a LUA table containing all the rows. So by using this, you're automatically fetching everything at once. Whereas if you go for this one, you would have to structure your SQL statement in a way that returns the information how you need it. Fetch all will just return everything. Now, flexibility lets you loop over each row to process or display data. You guys saw this as well. Um, those were in my, what did I call this? On the VIP menu class, last class, I have no idea what I named this. So let's see real quick, just to show you. So in our server file, of course, databases are used server side. Let me see, where exactly am I using it? If I even did use a for loop for you guys. Yep, right here. No, not that one. Okay, I seem it seems that I didn't use it for that, but okay. If you get a whole bunch of rows, which is just an array or a table, and then you can go through it however way you wanna, fetch all just gets all the information, all the rows. Execute. Executes a query that modifies data. Now, keyword modifies. You want to use execute, although you can use it for a select, you can use it for anything that you use these as well, but you want to use it to modify information. For example, inserting, updating, and deleting information. Now, this particular function, execute, has something very interesting, and it's that um, it returns the number of rows affected, so you know the impact of your query. This will help you since it returns a number. It will be, you can access the property. I think it's, I don't remember specifically because I use a lot of different libraries for SQL, but it'll return a number and then you can validate if X amount of rows was modified, then you know it succeeded, otherwise it failed. This is on the error handling side. It prevents data retrieval overhead. Now, overhead is a weird word. It just means that anything that has overhead will take longer to complete, thus increasing the resources needed for your script. Now, you want to watch that when you're using this, you already know it's optimized for database modifications. So whenever you are going to insert information, update information, or basically just modify information, you want to use execute. Now, some extras. Each of these functions takes a callback, as I mentioned before, where you can handle errors. I don't know why I'm reading it from here. It's just when I'm modifying, where you can handle errors gracefully. Always check for errors in callbacks. Now, always, and we're going to do that in just a few seconds as well. Performance for these specific functions is basically using the simplest function that meets your needs. That's why I explained, even though you can do a lot of things that you can do with each other, you can do it with just one of them. It's not always the best way to do it because some other functions are designed specifically for one thing. So use the simplest function that meets your needs. If you only need one value, do not use fetch all because it retrieves more data than necessary. And this is something very key when dealing with scripts that rely heavily on database information or any UI, such as, for example, I'd say you're making a jobs creator, or you're making a garage, stuff that just constantly will be reading information from database and writing. You stored it, you took it out, this and that. You always want to make sure you're using the correct one for performance's sake. Readability, clear separation between functions that read data, fetch scalar and fetch all, and those that write data. Execute makes the code easier to follow, which is something that we've been talking since day one. The way you write the code does matter. So now, um, without further ado, let's go real quick and let's just create an autosql.lua. I won't make a whole script with the manifest and stuff. We're just gonna be um, writing code. So the first thing we're gonna do, and this is actually going to be homework for the end. In this instance, I'm going to make the script to automatically execute the SQL file whenever the script starts, if and only if the table does not already exist. Now, I am going to do one table. The homework will be explained in the end as well, more in details, but the homework will be, instead of taking one table and checking for it, check for multiple tables in case your script uses multiple tables. So in this case, the first thing we need is we need to define what table we're going to be checking against. Just a simple variable with a string value called, let's say, test table, for example. Next thing we're going to do is the way we're going to execute the SQL will be through a SQL file. So we're going to contain our queries.sql here in this SQL file. So let's say um, this is just a simple query to create the table. We assign, let's say, name type text, and we assign last name is type text. Something very simple that this SQL file will execute. Now, next thing we need is the path to this SQL, of course. Let's just call it path to SQL. We're going to do a direct path, resources. Wait, I'm not in resources. Let's just do queries.sql since it's on the same folder. If you have it on your resources, for example, you could do it this way. Let's say this is a resource inside the resources folder. Now, the way you access would be resources, one of the ways, resources, name of your resource, name of resource, just a regular path, and um, the SQL file name, just like this. I'll leave this just in comments, just in case. Now, we have the table we want to check against. We have the SQL file containing the SQL statements to create it if it does not exist. Next thing we need to do is we need to keep track if the database has been checked. Now, we want to keep track because we do not want the script to be running the database check every once in a while, every 5 seconds, whatever config you can add on it. We want it to do it just one time when the script begins. So let's create a checked a checked variable, and we're gonna set this to a boolean. You guys remember booleans? In this case, we're gonna use false. It is not checked. Now, I also want to add a function to log the details of the operations. It is always a good practice to log everything that happens so you know what is going on in your own code. So we're going to make this function. It receives an argument message, and the only thing this function will do is print database check just to identify what the print is about. And we're just going to append the message. Perfect. Now that we have that, we have the logs. We're going to call it every time an action is performed. Next thing we need to do now is check whether table is the actual logic of this whole file, checking if the table exists, if not created, check whether table exists or not. For that, we're going to be using a function, of course, local function, table exists. This function will receive a callback, which is just the action to execute um, when the function returns. So if checked, we're going to check if we already did the check in case this function is called again by whatever reason. If it is checked, just return nothing. Now, whatever we execute down here will only be executed if checked is false. Now, we're going to proceed to use MySQL. This is from Ox MySQL. MySQL async dot fetch scalar. We just talked about this function. Now, can somebody tell me why I'm going to use fetch scalar? Does anybody know by any chance?
You only checking one database,
Yeah, we could make cookies. Checking one
one
database, not
column. I mean,
really.
one column.
One column. Are you sure?
Yes, one column. Oh no,
Okay, so no, that is wrong. Let's find the answer. I'm not gonna tell you the answer just yet. So, what is this function called?
fetch scalar.
No,
Are you
this
talking about
function,
table? Oh, table is yeah.
yeah, it's called table exists. So, how do you think? Don't think about SQL or programming itself. How do you think we can check if a table exists?
Mm,
No. Okay. Anybody
yeah,
else knows? Ah, it's a good. Oh, good. We'll see the answer now. Okay, well, let's proceed. The way we know if a table exists, talking abstract outside of code and SQL itself, is by counting. So we're going to count the number of tables returned, the amount of tables that exist, with the given name using a SQL query. Now, this will return us a number, a count, and this is what we need. So since it's one value, we are going to be using fetch scalar. Now, the way we structure this query would be the following way. We select, of course, now we are counting across all tables. Always remember this symbol right here in programming can either mean multiplication or all. So in this case, it means all. Select count from everything, count everything from, now information, this is a little more how can I say it, more advanced, but we're gonna see how you can get this very easily using either Heidi SQL or data grid. So we're gonna specify information schema dot tables where the table name equals our table. This is how we concatenate values in a SQL statement. So we're giving it test table. Select count everything from information schema, the list of tables, where the table name is just our table name. Now, if you guys remember, every of these function, every single one of them has a callback. A callback is just another function that you're going to execute either inside this function like in the same syntax and scope, or when it's returned? There you go, guys. Get your questions ready. Okay, we'll give them a few minutes to get the questions ready while we. Do you guys want me to continue or wait for you guys to get some stuff? Well, I'll just continue. Kishi. Yep. Okay, so next thing we are going to do in here is we're going to open bracket and we're going to provide the value of this little interpolation string right here. Interpolation at table that we have. We're going to specify which is the interpolation string and we're going to specify the value. In this case, this is not a callback. This is just the value of the interpolation string. We've done this before. Now we go into the callback. We create a function which will contain a result from the query we're about to execute. We end our functions, of course. And now let's go. First thing is that checked equals true. As soon as this function gets executed, we are going to update this so that the program stores. I can't write queries.sql, can't get the dots. Which dots are you referring to, Reggie?
Oh, sorry, I don't have them now. At first, it had like the dots in front of it all. It was a bit confusing. But now you don't have it. For some reason, they're not there anymore.
Is
That's
it
weird.
while I'm typing or something?
I don't know.
It
When
might
I
be at.
saw it, it had loads of like dots before the name and then before the last name. It was really weird.
Oh
No,
no,
that's
I don't
fine.
use
I
those.
can sort that in a minute. It's fine.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I'll write that out in a minute.
Okay, so um, we update our program so it knows that we have checked the database, even though we haven't yet. But that's what's going to happen after this. You can either do it afterwards or before. It's completely optional and won't even accept performance, um, affect performance. So next thing we have to do is something that I've also always mentioned, and it's that your code must be sanitized, cleaned, um, self-healing, any way you want to call it. And this just means planning for failure. If we go ahead and we try to do something with result, but by any chance result is nil, remember this data type, or doesn't have any value, it's going to break our code. So of course, the next thing we need to do before we proceed is making sure that result exists. Now, you guys remember that doing this is a Boolean operation, and if result exists and has a value, it will return true, thus executing whatever is inside the if. If result has no value at all or is nil, it'll just return false, which will not make this execute. We want to do another check because in here we're just checking if result exists. But now we have to check that, first of all, converting result, which would be a number in a string. Remember that I explained this is not the same as this. This is a text, this is a number, an integer. So we want to convert that integer result to a number and then make sure that it's greater than zero. This means that if result exists and at the same time, the version of result converted to number is greater than zero, then execute. Now, real quick recap about the AND operator. AND operator will basically only work, only execute the code um, inside here if and only if both sides are true. So if it is true and true. If you have false in here, it will not execute. If you have false in here, it will not execute. Difference from the or, which is just false or true. Either side is true, it will execute. In this case, we need that both result exists and that the number version of result is greater than 0. Now, if it's greater than 0, we're going to log to keep track table name, the table that we're checking against, either exists, no action required, however you want to structure this, or we use an else if any of those conditions is false, and we are going to log table, same thing, just the other way. Table name does not exist, whatever else you guys want out in here. We have the logging. Now we need to take action. How do we take action? Well, this function is coming to its end because this is how, well, actually, I'll mention this when the other function is written. Now we need to do one more thing before we finish, and that is callback true and callback false. Now, what am I doing here? As you guys remember, we created table exists with a callback parameter or argument. This will be a function that will be expecting a Boolean value to know if the table exists or not, and we will just create it. Now, in here, we know that it exists, so we can safely execute whatever logic we pass through callback and say, true, it does exist, otherwise false, of course. Now, let's go ahead and before we continue actually calling table exists, next thing we need to do is function to insert SQL if table does not exist. Because we want this to be an automatic SQL execution. So, as usual, we're creating another function, execute SQL, mind the naming, however you guys want to name it is fine. Can you drop the last bit down? It wasn't finished. Oh, yes, yes. This code, you will have it at the end, of course, as well. Let me know when you got it. Or I can just copy and paste it too for you. LUA, and we send it right there. Okay, a little moment for Mr. Abidin. You're asking how you can use the logs in debug mode only? Awesome. See, what would be the downside to have it only? Oh, well, I mean, most, yes, it is there, but here's the thing. What happens if you update the database, which will happen as if you keep. No, it's not hard, man. Go ahead and ask any question. So, it's not a downside of having it in debug mode only, like in development, because if you update anything on your database, which you will most likely do, you want to have those updates. So you just update your SQL, do some changes to check for the version. We can actually do something like that, checking for versions and stuff to know when to update the database. This will just handle automatic database updates so that no matter what you do in your, you as a developer in your script, people don't have to go and, oh, there's a new SQL, let me update it. I've seen a lot of people that is actually the way to do it. They'll just make up another file called cleandatabase.lua, and using script versions from the FX manifest, you can say, okay, there's a new version, um, check if there are any changes, clean database, do this and that. Of course, this all needs to be properly structured because cleaning database does not mean deleting the table. Might mean altering the table and adding more stuff. Um, as well as you never know if your user, um, a user from your script or something just deletes the table. You never know what they're gonna do, so this will always be there to serve as a reminder if anything should happen to the table. So, moving forward, guys, we are now going to execute our file. And here, I chose to do it this way because you can also just, cram all the SQL in the function and stuff. But this way it's clean. And it's also a way for me to show you guys another side of Lua that maybe, just maybe, you haven't seen yet. So we're going to be briefly seeing IO. This is basically just input, output. How do you deal with files in a programming language? I love the way Lua does it because it's just like Python. It's very simple, and this serves for a lot of things. Now, you never want to change the usage of a database to storing information in a file, unless it's something simple. For example, you're updating permissions for a, let's say you have the same example of the admin menu for my first class. You have a Lua table with permissions for a Discord ID role, and it contains admin tag. It contains a list of permissions. And let's say that instead of storing this information on database, you just want to store it on a .json file. You can do this by directly modifying the JSON using input output. So let's dive into it real quick. First thing we need, as anything that you are trying to read from, whether it be database, API, or file, you need somewhere to store the information that you just obtained. So we do this by defining a variable called file, or however you want it. We use the native Lua IO functionality, and we open a file. Now, the SQL file path is what we defined up here, path to SQL. This can be directly a string if you want. It's better to just have this. You can modify everything at the top of your file. How to full screen on Discord. If you click on any of the speakers' names, it should probably focus if you're not focused, and then just down here, full screen or pop out. Let me know if you can get if you get it. So we open this file by passing the file with io.open. And then we need to give an argument, or commonly referred to as a flag when dealing with files. This is referred to as a flag. The flag we need is R, which stands for read. As you can see, you have a lot of them. R plus, I'm not going to be diving into what these do, but I'll just give a brief idea of the different flags. Some of them just allow you to read and write. Some of them allow you to append to an existing file, not override the content. Some of them allow you to modify a read-only file, and so on and so forth. And here we're just interested in reading, so we're gonna be giving it the R flag. Open file and set the R flag for reading. VS Code a bit bigger. Yikes. What about now? Yes, I do. How about now? Okay, perfect. So yeah, we open the file, set the R flag for reading, and and we move forward. Actually, can anybody tell me what would be, don't think the next step in executing the SQL. This is not what I want. We just read a value from some place and we assigned it to a variable. Before we continue using this variable, what do you guys think we should be doing? Let's see. Come on, I want to see you guys talking. There are no.
Could you repeat that one more time?
So we just do not think on executing SQL. Just we got data from somewhere and we assigned it to a variable. What do you think we should continue to do before we use that variable? Local file. What do you think we should do with file before we try to access it? Let's see.
Shouldn't we define file because file isn't defined nowhere, as I can see.
Nope. Nope. File is, we're defining file here. So let's
Oh, okay,
actually
now I
just,
can see.
yeah, let's go here. And I'm gonna give you just a small hint. What we have to do is on this code right here. A guard class? What do you mean? Oh no, it's all good. Thank you for joining. Have a nice day at work. All right, so let me just give you guys a little help. So remember, table, what with the table? Okay, I think you're on the right path. So yeah, no, we already have the information. Remember that I said, do not think what you need to do to execute the SQL. Now, what I've been saying, and I really, really want you guys, because this is, trust me, going to help you a lot, avoid a lot of errors and stuff and problems. Whenever you are trying to use a value that you assign to a variable through something that is dynamic, meaning a file, a database, an API request, and it's not something that you know the value. So let's say data equals name, for example. This, you know the value because you assigned it. Unless you're not modifying it again, then, but in most cases, you need to check that it exists. Because here you have no idea. Yes, you can say, okay, this should return the content of this file. But what happens if for whatever reason the path is wrong, you made a typo, and you just do, you try to access the file properties, you're going to break your code. And you're probably going to be like, what's going on, this and that. Now, we check if file exists. In this case, I'm going to check if file does not exist because it's the shorter, um, what did I write filter? The shorter logic. If the file does not exist, then what we want to do is we want to log into our console as usual. And for debugging purposes, I remember that. Yeah, it's just checking, sanitizing your code. Code is, it can handle errors without breaking. It can let you know what's going on without having to just, break everything. So could not open SQL file at, and for debugging purposes to make our life easier, we're going to specify the path where we're trying to open the file, just so we can know where we're trying to access it. If it does not exist, we return. Now proceeding, we're going to do the following: local SQL content. Now we're going to directly access the text or the information, the value inside of the file, because this, it fetches the file and it stores it on this variable. In other languages, you might say that this is of type file, not text or string, because it is not the content, it is just the file itself. Now here, the content of the file, we can read it by doing file, which is our variable, and the read function, just like you would call an export. File read all. Now, why is this done with both this symbol and all, even though they mean the same? I don't know, but this is the way this is done. This selects everything inside here. Now mind that if you want to do further research on the file, you can do a bunch of things, even choosing specific lines. You can read the whole file, you can read the next line, skipping the end of line, returning nil and end of file, so on and so forth. In this case, we're just going to be using the all flag. After we have stored, and this is extremely important when dealing with input output or files, whenever you're done reading the content of your file, close it. Because if you leave your file open, this will lead to, probably you guys have heard of this before, it's called memory leak. This would just mean that you have your file open without it needing to be open, and it'll just be consuming RAM, memory, like crazy. And sometimes if your code is not properly written, it'll just even overflow your entire RAM and just cause a mess. So whenever you have what you need, close it. In our case, you could argue, well, we're not using file or SQL content before closing it. It doesn't matter because SQL content, before we close it, has already been assigned the value. So even if I close it here, if I print file, it'll print nothing because the file is closed. There is no file. But if I print SQL content, we have already assigned the content of the file, so it'll have it. Moving forward, we close it. Then again, very important as well, always check if the variables from dynamic data sources, such as a file, a database, or an API, check if the content exists and if there is anything else that you want to check. In this case, I want to check, this is what applies to this because we are reading text as a string. I want to check if it's not equal to an empty string. If SQL content end, of course. Then real quick, SQL content has a value. It's not nil. It's not void of value. And the set content from SQL is not equal to, which is represented like this on Lua. On JavaScript, it's this way, exclamation mark equal. In Lua, we use squiggly line equal. It's not equal to an empty string. Then and only then proceed. Now, execute our SQL query. Now, if it exists and you get here, congratulations, you got the SQL file through Lua. The player no longer has to go and copy, open Heidi SQL, open whatever it is they use, paste it, execute it. Your script just made it for them. Now we have this content. We, of course, actually, can anybody tell me what function I'm going to use here from the ones we talked about? Come on, I want to see you guys talking. Yes, correct. There we go. We're going to do an execution. Why? Because we're going to be modifying the database. We're not reading, fetching, seeing what's in there. We are telling it, change this, this, and that. Here we're just going to pass an empty table. This does not describe the name of the parameters. But in this case, to insert specifically, we're going to be using this. Now I want to name it rows changed. Remember that execute tells us the number of rows that were affected. So we know the impact of our query and if it was properly executed or not. The way this is done is by using the callback in executes arguments and rows changed argument, which will get its value after this is done, after this is executed. So we are going to log SQL executed, if nothing fails, successfully. And then we're going to say rows affected. Let's add the rows that were changed. Now, this is the second part of the homework, checking if, and this is actually very simple, just checking if through the number of rows changed, if this succeeded or not, and log it that way. Although, this is a certain error handling, but not on the execution itself. So we're just going to do error. What can I do here? Well, the file is empty, so let's just do file is empty or cannot be read, something like this. Yeah, because this, let me make sure else. Yep, this is when the file was not found or content is empty. Let's move forward. Actually, we're done with execute SQL. Let me make sure we read the file. If not file, SQL content, close the file, make sure that we have a content and execute it. Log, and logging. Okay, so this is our execute SQL function. Now, so far, we have the table name, we have the location of our SQL file. We are controlling the state, so the program knows whether it has been checked upon startup or not. We have a logging function, which isn't really needed because you can just do prints. But then if you're going to customize this, Um, you can easily just do if config.debug, for example, config.debug, then and only then print. That means that you can easily give your customers or yourself an easy way to disable all the prints without having to go manually. Oh, let me remove this print or add if config debug, so on and so forth. We focalize everything on one place. So then when we modify the behavior, we just modify it on one place and it affects the entire script. That's what we talked about last class as well. Having modular code, not over repeating things that can just be simplified. We have our logging. We have the check if our table exists. First thing we do if is this is currently false, return. Don't do anything else. Otherwise, we are fetching through fetch scalar in a SQL statement. We are fetching the current table name that we defined up there. Now, immediately we do this, we check, is it, we make sure that checked is equal to true. Yes, the program knows that we have checked it. If there is a result, and remember always this, let me actually do it here. Result from this specific query will be a string, such as 10. So we have to make sure that we convert it to a number, an integer, and that is greater than 0. If it does, we log it, we do callback. Otherwise, we log it and we do callback. We're going to actually add the functionality for callback after this function. Now we have the function to insert the SQL if the table does not exist. We do this by first opening our file with the read flag. We make sure that the file exists before we proceed. We assign, if the file exists, we assign its text content to SQL content variable, and we close our file because we no longer need it to prevent performance issues. We check if the content that we assign to SQL, two things, it exists and it's not an empty string, because you could argue, okay, well, it exists. If you don't do this check, it exists. Go ahead and execute, but it's not going to execute anything because there's nothing there. We can simply check if it's empty by doing this, not equal to empty. We use execute, which we already talked about, to insert the information we get from here, and we log if the file is empty or cannot be read. Now, moving forward, the last thing we need is to actually perform the check, and depending on the table existing or not, call execute SQL. So the way we're going to achieve this is by creating an event handler. You guys have more than likely seen this. In case you haven't, this will help with the resource and framework native events. So use this to listen for events, see the events page for more info. There are a lot of them, such as on resource stop, on this and that, on server stop, etc. Actually, I don't know if server stop is one. I don't remember, but the one we're gonna be using today is on resource start. This is one that I use actually a lot. So this is any logic that you wanna execute whenever the resource starts without waiting for player interaction. So in a regular script, let's say you don't have a on resource start, you just have, let's say, a command that opens an NUI and then a bunch of features. Now, whenever the script starts, it will do nothing until the player goes ahead and executes the command, the keybind, or whatever condition you set to trigger it is met. In this case, whatever we do inside here um, will be executed whenever a resource starts automatically. Now, when resource starts, the first thing we want to do is make sure that we are executing it on the proper resource. If get resource name, which is a function that we're also going to be seeing and why it's used just a little further when we get down here to Lua and JS communication. For some reason, I decided to talk about it there. But if the current resource where this is being executed is not equal to the resource name, this will be automatically inferred, and I have already talked about this a lot. infer is just passing a value, um, just passing a value to the function from the runtime. What does this mean? At the time the compiler goes through these lines of code and read it, automatically resource name will be the value of the current resource name. Same thing we are doing in here. Was that well, we have result. Yeah, in the check. Result. Same way. You see, result. There is no specific way that we're saying result equals to this and that. No, this is a callback, and whatever this returns will be automatically assigned or inferred to result. Same thing down here. As soon as event handler on resource start is executed and read, this will be equal to your resource name. So if the current resource where you are calling this is not equal to the resource name, then return. Now, this can actually be, I'll explain more in depth in just a minute. Yeah, let's finish this quick script. We're going to log checking if table, actually, no, let's just not do that much text. Table name, checking if table exists. Pretty simple. And now we can just call our table exists function. As I said before, this expects a callback. A callback is nothing more, nothing less than another function. So we get the function, we assign it if it exists or not, which, if you remember, is the argument that we are specifying here. Callback, whatever function we pass to this, will receive true or false, depending on our operation up there. So this is the argument that we're going to be expecting. We, of course, end it. And it's just one simple line of code. If not, well, not one line, but should be done in one line. If not exists, then execute SQL function. Now, please format this. And there you have a fully functioning script or file, I'd say, not a script, a file that you can use on any resource. You just need to properly set up this. It'll check if one table exists, and it'll execute the SQL from whatever file you guys set it on, whatever path. Now, the homework, which I will be adding in here, there was something else that I wanted you guys to do, but I forgot. For now, let's just do this one, which is the original one I had in mind. Instead of checking for one table, check for multiple. And just a small hint, extremely small and ambiguous, for loops. This is what we're gonna have for homework. I actually do recommend you guys to do it because this is just thinking on the things that we have already talked about before and putting them in practice. There is nothing new that you guys have not seen, and I have made sure by that because everything that you need I have already explained on all these documents. If you don't remember something, just go in here, take a look at lesson number 1, which will explain you the conditionals, how objects, tables, and maps, with some examples, loops, etc. So this is it for the SQL part. Do you guys have any questions? No questions? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, this is um a little expansion on SQL, how to interact with SQL in a different way, because remember that we already showcased some interaction with SQL, such as selecting, inserting information as well through different things. So let me relink this to you guys. Small thing, always remember that you cannot do database operations client side. You can communicate through server and client as usual with the trigger events, but no client side will accept this. Well, yeah, it can accept IO, but it will not accept MySQL. It just won't work there. Now, Let's see what we have next on the list. Lua and JavaScript communication. Now, I know that a lot of you guys have seen on any of our classes, on mine, any of the other professors, you have seen how you can toggle an NUI, hide it based on sending an NUI message and stuff like that. So I will mention that very briefly, just in case anybody doesn't know or doesn't remember. But that will not be my focus. My focus is more what goes on behind. What does actually event listener mean? What is fetch? Why am I using a post? What is this application right here? What is this? So the first thing that before you even think of receiving or sending data from Lua to from JavaScript to Lua or receiving from Lua to JavaScript, you need to know what is HTTP. Well, you might argue, I've made a dozens of UI. I know how this works. I have already used it before. Yes, but as the amazing title that Kishi made on the announcement for this class, I don't want you guys to just copy the code and paste it and know that it'll work, because it happens that you can just memorize this. You can just memorize a bunch of words like you memorize your country's national anthem, for example. You just memorize a bunch of words and you know that it'll do something, but you have no idea why it's doing that something. So when it comes time to scale and use the same concepts that you're using in here, oh, yes, I do. Yikes. Okay, well, just imagine memorizing a bunch of people's names. You, if you know 20 people, you know more words than this function takes. So, yikes. So yeah, I want you guys to understand, because when it comes, when it's time to scale, as I was saying, and use the same, very same concept that you have here, I can guarantee that if you don't know how it works behind, you're gonna get lost. So for example, if you know how this function is used, but not how it works, okay, you can understand. I'm doing a post. I have said it myself in classes before. It's sending information, etc. But if I tell you, okay, go here in Postman, for example, which is a pretty common tool for backend developers and people that do APIs and stuff like that, you will have no idea probably what to do in body, or why are we using JSON? What is raw? Why are we not using form data, URL encoded, binary, crazy shit like that? I will not explain all of these, of course, but I'll get to how this works behind. So the first thing is that HTTP, if you don't already know, is the backbone of the internet. I would not go as far to say that without HTTP you cannot use the internet, but I will say that without HTTP you will not be able to access 99 or probably 90%. I don't want to say a specific percentage because I don't have the stats, so I don't like talking about stuff that I don't know. But I will say that a vast majority of the today's websites you will not be able to access, because HTTP is the protocol used. Now you might find old companies, old insurance companies, agencies, stuff like that that still use SOAP, but please, I am begging you, whatever you do not use SOAP. This is so outdated, so old, so slow. Now, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So in one word, what is HTTP? Well, it's a protocol. Now, you might see HTTPS. This just means HTTP. It just means Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. Both are the same thing. One is encrypted, one is not, the traffic. So HTTP is part of the internet stack, and it runs on the TCP protocol, and it can also run on the UDP protocol. For databases, for example, you are using TCP. This is the little introduction to networking that I mentioned, because it is true that to be good at one thing, you cannot over expand. Now, In programming, this doesn't apply as much when we're talking about programming languages, because if you guys remember in my first class, I said once you understand all these basics, you cannot just touch Lua and JavaScript. You can go comfortably and touch Python. You can go and touch Ruby, which is a very simple language. You can touch other languages, and although you might need to learn a different syntax or a different way things are done, I can guarantee that the base will always be the same. You'll always have arrays. They will be called tables and use brackets, curly brackets instead of square brackets. But at the end, it's an array. It's how the computer interprets the information. It's a string, whether you want to call it a string, a text, how you can even call it in SQL, variable character, it's a string. So TCP, the way this works, it sends packets, and I will not expand fully on this because it is not really needed to know right now, but this is important because at least you know when you do a post, you know through which methods and what is the protocol, what is the channel through which you guys are communicating. Because yeah, no, don't worry. Coding makes me want to die sometimes too. It happens to all of us. It's just a matter of perseverance and, having a strong base. So don't worry. Oh, what kind of computer science stuff? Yep, me too. I have died more than I care to admit. Okay, let's see. What's the computer science stuff that makes you want to scream out your mouth or smack your keyboard against your table, which I would not advise. Networking and inside the CPU, like the FDE cycle. Well, I have no idea what FDE stands for, but if it's how CPUs process cycles, don't even get overwhelmed about it. Fetch, decode, okay, then I have no idea. Yeah, well, I have no idea what fetch decode is. So you're probably doing either assembly or some stuff like that. But networking is not that hard. It's just understanding stuff. As everything else. So moving forward, TCP sends packets directly to the server and awaits confirmation of receival. TCP will send packets to the server. Packets is just the way the information is transmitted through packets. Now it sends it directly to the server and awaits confirmation of receival. UDP is a protocol most known for its, I'd say, unreliability, but at the same time, it is reliable because guess what? UDP is used for gaming. A lot of games use UDP, and here's the reason. As we said, TCP, they send the packet, that protocol sends the packets and waits for the server to tell it, yes, I received it. If the server did not receive it, it sends it again. And actually, let me just add another term to your dev vocabulary, if I will. Confirmation of receival through handshakes. What the server does between server and client, it performs a handshake. That is exactly what it's called in the networking world, to know whether it received it or not. Now, UDP is faster because it sends multiple instances, let's just call it that way, of the same packet without awaiting confirmation. So UDP does not care whether you received uh, the packets. It does not care. It'll just send a bunch of the same packet to make sure that it will be received. That's why this is used in gaming, because this reduces the milliseconds needed for the server to respond to the client. Database connections are made through TCP, so on and so forth. Now, this is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Some of the important things that you guys need to note are some of the very basic HTTP codes. And why am I going to mention them? Because you could do, for example, I did something for a QS project that I'm working on where, let me actually just show you. It's a very simple script, but QS5M API. The idea behind this is that you have just one small simple server file as the entire script, and this will work as an API or an HTTP server. This will make inside our FiveM a new HTTP server that we can send information to or read from. Now, this will enable me to just go to a tool like Postman and say, well, you guys have it right here. This was the test I made whenever I made it. You can post your server's IP, and I think this is probably too small, but I cannot. Oh, yeah, I can make it bigger. You can post your server IP and the name of your resource. And once you do this, you enable things such as, for example, action, banning a player. What's the metadata? Player one. Reason. Rule break. Now, this HTTP enables you to, outside of your server, with outside tools, you can make a nice website. You can make a Discord bot like I made. You can make a mobile application. Whatever it is you want, you can still interact with your server without having to be on it. So that's why HTTP is very important. I don't know what's going on with my, oh yeah, I just maximized it. There we go. So that's why I'm going to show you guys some of these codes um, that you could use in case that you are doing HTTP calls. And this does not apply only if you have an HTTP server on your FiveM city. This applies if you have a resource and you want to read information, even from FiveManage. If you're storing information from FiveManage and you want to read a URL, you want to read some um, time zone JSON data for, to apply time zones and stuff. You want to read anything from any different API, we go for the status codes. The most common ones that you will see and that will help you in error handling in your script are the following. Now, do note that the status codes, there are over 1,000 of them, so it is not needed to know all of them. Not even I know all of them. 200 succeeded. Now, you could do in your code something like if status code, equals, of course, here you have to properly access it, equals to 200, then you know it executed. You know it. Yes, perfect. You hate them. Well, they are pretty useful. There's a lot to learn, so I wouldn't recommend trying to learn all of them unless you're going to be a penetration tester. Um, but yeah, 200 succeeded. 400 bad request. For example, yes, and I'm meaning in the ethical hacking thingy. So 400 would be a bad request. This means that, for example, you are expecting a certain parameter, but you don't send it. This can make a bad request, or you could also receive a 500 server error. This is your fault. You made something wrong. This is the developer of the server's fault, of the API, whatever it is. If you made the API, then this is your mistake as well. If you receive 401, you are unauthorized. Let me show you an example of the usage of, I don't know what the hell I just wrote in there, but let me just, unauthorized. There we go. Unauthorized. An example is, how am I securing my FiveM API on my server from other people? Just there are a lot of ways you can find information about a publicly exposed API or HTTP server. So if they find out, oh, I just have to send this ban and metadata, they can mass ban all my players. How do we avoid this? Well, one of the ways I do it is just by sending a secret. I could send it as a header, but in this case, I'm using it on the body. This SQL will be, the secret will be validated on my FiveM API before we proceed. Yes, right here. If not data or data does not secret as usual, does not exist. Let me make this bigger. I apologize. I keep forgetting. If there is no data, there is no data dot secret, or data dot secret is not equal to the API secret that I set on the config of the FiveM API, then 403 unauthorized. Yes, there is 403 and 401. Um, being honest with you, both are kind of the same, but they are not the same. I think 403 is forbidden. Yeah, 403 is forbidden. You are denied access. You can use either of those or expand on why you would use forbidden versus unauthorized, but I'm just putting the codes out there that you might encounter while trying to use HTTP on your FiveM resource. And last but not least, I'm going to give you guys two more. 404, not found. Whatever it is you're trying to access, it does not exist. And 201, which is modified. Now, this you can technically just always use 200. Yeah, everything succeeded, but if you want to be a good developer, as I always mentioning, you want to do the best practices. You want to write the code your own way, yes, but following industry standards, because this will guarantee that even if you go for a job interview, for example, and somebody sees your code, they're going to understand it. It doesn't mean if they don't understand your code because it does not follow standards, it does not mean that they are not a good coder. It means that they have no idea how you did it. Code can be written multiple ways. Now, if you want to use proper standards, when you do something like, let's say this SQL in here, instead of us doing it directly on database, just imagine that for whatever reason you wanted to do it through an API. So you just make a post request to your API and have the API do it. Instead of sending, yes, it succeeded. If you are modifying information, you can do 201, which means the resource that you try to modify was modified. 200 is more for when you want to make sure that whatever it is you are reading was returned, the request succeeded, so on and so forth. Now, I will not keep going on networking because it is not that deep in Lua. But if you want to further expand your toolkit, then yes, it is a good idea to know how to use APIs and HTTP and read information from other places more than databases and files. This is the base that you will need to understand when you read documentation, such as things from Postman, which is a very amazing tool for testing your APIs and anything you need. You will now understand it. I will explain this now when we get to this part. So yeah, now we are getting here. Window.add event listener. Before we continue, is there any questions? Anything that you guys, it doesn't have to be a question, guys. Anything you want me to expand just a little bit more on, it's not directly clear. Something that maybe you're thinking on reading after the class is over, after what I've said. Anybody? Oh, I guess we have the smartest graduation here. Nice. Okay, guys, let's proceed. And don't be shy. Listening for events is another crucial part of Lua and JavaScript communication. Now, why do I want to explain you guys in simple terms how this works is for the following reason. This, you could do it in here, but for example, the other day I tried to use Flutter, which is a very powerful framework to make, and do not use it. I do not recommend it yet for you guys. Flutter for making an NUI in FiveM. But guess what? Flutter does not have native JavaScript like HTML does. Flutter is pure Dart, which is just like TypeScript. It's a superset or a version of JavaScript on steroids. I was able to easily understand, even though I had never done this before. It was easy to understand how I could communicate from even Dart through to Lua by doing the same thing that is done in JavaScript. Now, you guys might have seen add event listener and fetch, sending information, but now let's see it real quick on Dart to see what the difference would be on a completely different, even though it's based on JavaScript. Well, here's the thing, and I'm going to actually give you guys a small demonstration of why I do not recommend Flutter right now. Flutter is a very advanced framework. Um, I actually just might bring a new professor that can teach you guys how to make UI, if that is something that, a lot of people is interested. Um, Making UI not necessarily related to FiveM, just writing code for UI. And Flutter is the best framework for that. I'm not gonna get a lot off topic, but just um, Flutter allows you to do things in one code base using Dart, and you can execute the same NUI on web, as a Windows application, as an iOS application, as an Android application, as a Linux application, on your Apple Watch, on your Android phone, on your Android car, so on and so forth. What basically, wherever you want to execute it, it's more than likely that Flutter has a way of achieving this. It's a tool by Google, and it's nothing like React. It's just, I don't like to say that one framework is better than the other, but when it comes to portability, so being able to write the code one time, React just stays behind. Um, but it's very powerful as well and can do, I'd say, 95% of the things that Flutter can do. But the point is that going here, for example, let me see if on this one I do have um, this code. If not, I know where I have it. Nope, I'm not using it on this one. Ooh, let's go ahead and find a new one. Just to give you guys an example of why it's important to understand HTTP more than, oh yes, I can just write fetch and maybe even just have this pasted on a notepad somewhere and just change the NUI callback in the data, because that is not what I want for you guys. That's when you do that kind of stuff, that's when you try to do something more advanced and then you're like suddenly, oh my God, I do not understand. I don't know how to do this, but you already know how to do this. You just don't understand the base. That is not what I want. So if we go here and we search send to Lua, okay, I guess I'm not using it on that one either. Yeah, this one was refactored to use something more complex than that. So it'll have to do with this one. Let me see. No, but that function has to be there. Hold on. There we go. So this is just a very simple, as I call this class, a Lua bridge, to send information to Lua from Dart. Now, as you can see, it has a lot of similarities with fetch. We're making a post request. We're giving it the headers. We're basically trying to use the same function. But hold on, let me make this bigger. I always forget. I am so sorry, guys. I can actually see here that I am using Dart HTML, but let me show you guys another way. You could, for example, write this. You could do, um, let's say, ignore this syntax. This is not what I want you guys to learn. Just take what I'm gonna tell you right now. Send. Now, what is this? I do not need a return. This is a void function. Oh, it's not asynchronous. Oof. Okay, so let's say I want to use, whether it's Python, whether it's Dart, whether it's Golang, whatever it is you want to use to send information using a post. This won't necessarily work for any UI, depending the language you're doing, because it has to be tied to the UI itself, or it might, because you can just do, for example, let's import what's known as HTTP, which is just Dart's way of doing HTTP requests. I don't have it installed. That is amazing. Um, this will be real quick because Flutter is not the focus, but I want you guys to feel comfortable looking at other code bases and knowing what the hell's going on in there. Oh, yes, because I'm very smart. Forgot to specify that this is an external package. This is not a Dart library. So we do HTTP dot post, we are posting, remember always the post, sending information through HTTP and TCP to any server that's willing to accept them. How do you get the server? By giving it a location, whether it's a domain.com, whether it's a local host, or whether you are sending the resource name. Let's say you are receiving the resource name here, and you are giving it this way. Now, keep in mind, this is very important. This is not the way you would do it. This could work in Flutter, yes, but if you do it from another language such as Python and the UI is not being rendered to HTML from Python, this will probably fail. This is just an example of how the communication is going on behind through HTTP. Um, and of course, you would need a body. Need the body with, I actually forgot, you need your headers, which is just an empty table or JSON or object. You need a body, of course. And I am missing something. Let's see, what am I missing? Um, oh, they are not named properties. And the little map string or operator. Headers is headers. Yep, it is not named property. Or is it? Looks like it is. No, it's not. Okay, never mind. This function is just crazy. URL, headers, body, and encoding. So we have our URL, headers, and body. One extra argument. Ignore this function. The thing is, you are doing a post request. Actually, no, wait. I want to solve this thing. What is the problem with this? This needs to be converted to the parse. And after we specify the post, close this in there, we need headers and we need body. Oh yeah, this is they are named properties, so that is my mistake. This is how a usual post request will always look, no matter where you see it, whether it's here, you will always have a body, which is of type JSON. You would have headers. This, you don't need most of them. We use content type application JSON. These I will not go into depth, but you are basically doing an HTTP request. If you want to expand on this, I can highly recommend Mozilla Web Docs, and I will add the link. HTTP. I would highly recommend you go through this because this is very important on understanding communication on the internet. Without this, yes, you can learn to make a FiveM script, but guess what? The script will be tied to database and client. Yeah, you can make a lot of good things, but then again, my focus on this series is not that you can finish it, as I've said multiple times, and yay, now I'm comfortable writing a LUA. No, 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 because then you will want to do something else. You will want to expand your capabilities, and you will try, and sometimes you will encounter roadblocks, and I don't want it to be frustrating. So better to know everything from before than when you need it. So let me add this real quick. Documentation on HTTP is very useful. Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And yes, point to end HTTP, LUA, and JavaScript communicate through HTTP. I'm sorry that my Dart example wasn't more explanatory, but there isn't really much to explain about requests. I did forget one thing. HTTP protocols, you have post, sending information. Let me check the chat. Okay. Oh, and yeah, I'm going to show you when I finish writing this why Flutter cannot be used in FiveM unless you really know what you're doing. Sending information to a server. Get. Fetching information from a server. And actually, let's do this. Post we can make it so that it's sort of an execute from MySQL, sort of because it does modify, or sometimes it just processes. That's why I say sort of. This would be a fetch, all, scalar, any of those. We are reading information. And a put is going to be an updating information. Now, don't get me wrong. Same thing as scalar and fetch all and all those SQL functions. You can do the same thing with both. But one, they're not made for that. And in this case, it is not the standard. You will see a lot of, and I am sorry if anybody does this, but I will say it because I've done it before as well. It's nothing. Lazy developers will do post for modifying information. And this is not the standard. If you want to modify information, you can do it with a post, but you should be doing it with a pod in a server slash database, etc. It's worth noting that both post and pod receive a body, which is an object, table, map, however the language that you have calls it. And always the type will be the content type, which is just a header to let the server know what kind of information you are sending will always be of application JSON, at least in these cases with FiveM. Always. Unless you want to go out of standard and do something weird with URL encoded data or form data, or your application is structured in a way that you need to do it that way for maximum efficiency. So far, this is some information about Lua and JavaScript communication, but in a way broader scope. So this is basically how the internet communicates. Whenever you go in here into this thing and you go and log in somewhere, you are doing gets and posts. If we go in here, for example, and you open the network, and yes, I will make it bigger. If you open the networking thing, you reload your website and you can see that this website just made a bunch of requests. All of those requests return status 200. If they were 304, etc., they're doing get 200. Okay. This one, for example, let me see. Here you can see the body, etc. But then again, I'm not gonna dive into this. Just as I said before, I like, even if it's in small portions, to showcase more of the advanced concepts, because you will never investigate or do something if you don't know it exists. It's happened to me, for example, when I tried to do stuff on Unreal Engine. When I started in 2020. The first thing I did was try to get tutorials on how to do very specific things, how to put a weapon on the hand of a player. And that just led me to not be able to do anything, because I was just trying to find constantly how to do stuff that if I knew the base, I would know. But guess what? I didn't do much of the research, because since I didn't learn the basics for Unreal Engine, I had no idea this could be done that way. I was trying to do it a way that's probably the worst way possible to do it. Now, if you know things, you at least know words. Next time when you're trying to do something, oh, I remember API was mentioned. I remember that when API was mentioned, it was mentioned something like post, get. I don't know what those are. Maybe. I don't remember, but at least you have them in your mind. And when you go do research, guess what? Your mind will just tick, retrieve the information easily because you already know it, have seen it, it's in your mind. Now, little bonus. Why not recommending JavaScript on steroids with Flutter is the following reason. I will show you guys right now. And actually giving you guys a spoken reason before showing you actually on FiveM what the problem was. In the words of my friend, Flutter is so advanced that if you want to enable something as simple as drag and drop, you have to make that functionality yourself. In CSS, React, etc., you have pre-made components that you can use for that. So that's why React is so good for beginners. But with Flutter, if you want to make a drag and drop, you have to make all the mathematics and all the functionality that behind repaint the entire UI, moving a window from one place to the other, leaving it there, knowing at which vector it's currently in. Just it's too advanced for starting to learn. You can learn how to make UI, but not for FiveM. Definitely not for FiveM. So let me show you what the problem was. Something very stupid, very simple, and trust me, we did do everything in our power to fix it. It can be fixed, but to fix it, we would have to basically rebuild a bunch of things, so it'll just take forever. Let's wait for this little server to spawn. All right, so here's the thing. Here's why I will not, and we're almost done with today's class. Just one more thing to talk about. I'll show you guys this, and that thing will be very short. We're gonna get away from that. Let's just spawn my UI. Now, the idea was that when you minimize it, um, it does this. But as you can see, the way Flutter works is by, which React does not work this way at all. Flutter manually paints each pixel. So even if you don't see it behind this, there is a whole white screen that is being painted into transparent. Now, when you do this, it is refreshing, but it is not being able to stop painting this on this side. Even though for whatever reason, when you maximize, okay, never mind, that doesn't even work anymore. So yeah, when you maximize, yeah, it just gets focused back here. So that is why I do not recommend Flutter. You will be stuck with very advanced stuff that. Oh, thank you. The UI looks nice. Appreciate it, man. I cannot take 100% of the credit for it, but yeah, thank you. Redo it. Yes. So in case you guys are wondering which tool I would prefer for, yes, it's for Quasar. So if you guys are wondering what tool I personally would recommend for building UI, Svelte. Why? Svelte is React without all the bullshit that comes with React. I know that React has a big fan base. Um, ooh. React has a big fan base. It is properly established, but Svelte is the power of React with less the complications, same performance. Actually, no, that is a lie. Best, um, better performance than React. It's faster, needs less library code, and a lot of good scripts that sell for a lot of money have been made with Svelte. So it is a very, very, very good framework for starters. Now, version control in practice and some very, very small CLI expansion. And let's see the chat before we proceed. I want to play chess with Kishi one day, but it has to be a day that you have time because we need to play a lot of matches, Kishi, until I'm able to beat you. I know it's gonna be hard. Yes, sir. We will. Okay, so I promised you guys, for those that were in the last class, that today we'll just expand. Let me get this docs. And real quick, did I add it in here ever? I think I did not. You see, I forgot. Yeah, let's add real quick something for HTTP. And real quick, if anybody is interested in Markdown, which is just writing stuff like this, to add a link. You can also just edit my markdowns on GitHub. I'll show you how and see how I wrote it. You can do this brackets. You type in your text, HTTP documentation, for example, and then with parentheses and no space, the link towards it. So now when you see this markdown, which is very good for writing documentation about scripts and stuff, it won't render yet because I'm a genius and I'm doing it inside a code block, which is the backticks. You know what? Let's just end this here, add this here, continue here. There we go. HTTP, once you click it, you can take your users to wherever you want. So for further reference on my documentation, you'll have this link for HTTP and this one for Git. Now, last class, we saw the following. Let's go back over here. We saw on version control everything that version control does for you as a developer, how it helps you and avoid some major catastrophe, probably even losing money. Um, some useful commands, and we showcased what they do. But now we're going to see branches and merges. So you can actually put this in practice if you are coding with someone else, or you have multiple developers, a friend, whatever it is for you guys. You're writing code together. So I do that same thing. If you guys see, for example, here in my server, I have a log for when my friend posts something. And when any of us post something, we get it here. But I won't be. I'll probably make a guide for this if you guys really want it. But that's not the topic. The topic is how to collaborate using branches, which are just copies of the same code that can be modified independently, and merges, which is just putting together two versions of the same code base. A lot of people will tell you to use GitHub Desktop. Me personally, I will not. Why? Because even though maybe some of you are beginners, some of you are advanced but have never seen Git before, I honestly, you can go for it. What I'm explaining here applies the same way. Um, but I don't like this for two reasons. Number one, this makes a developer lazy, especially when you are starting to learn. Why? Because this is a UI. It'll make everything easy for you. It's the same thing with artificial intelligence. I'm not against using it for coding. I use it all the time. I just don't have it make every single line of code and I do nothing. I don't like that because then you will never become a developer. You would just become an AI user and anybody can do that, right? So I like to show you guys how to do it using the command lines on the command line. So guess what happens? If for whatever reason you get a friend, a job, a customer, someone wants to hire you to do something on their FiveM server and you have to use Git, and it's on a Linux server. Surprisingly enough, Linux is way better than Windows for FiveM due to the way it works. So if you get a Linux server which has no UI at all, it's just a terminal, you will be lost. That's why I explained some of the CLI commands you can use to navigate through a folder. Quick recap, ls just lists everything you have. cd navigates to a folder. cd dot dot goes back. I'm saying it fast because this is already documented here. Um, So we go into FiveM, we go into TX data, use stop to autocomplete, we go into the server, and so on and so forth. We go into resources. Today I will be adding, let me see if I didn't add cat before. No, we created directories, we created files, we listed the content of a folder or a directory, we navigated to a directory or folder and going back from it one at a time, moving or renaming. So today we're going to be seeing some very simple but extremely useful ones before we dive into Git. And these are, let's actually go ahead and before we dive into Git, which is the last part, CLI expansion. Oh, never mind. I just have it right there. CLI expansion. Yeah, I pre-planned for this. Vibe coder, term of someone using Yeah, you know what there's another term specifically in the ethical hacking community. Thank you, man. Have a great night. So there's a term in the ethical hacking community referred to as script kiddies. It's basically someone that just goes on the internet, takes scripts, yeah, and has no idea what they're doing, and like claims this is mine, I use it, and stuff like that. It's never good to not know what you're doing. Um, that's why we have these classes. So CLI expansion, some of the commands, useful commands. Let's just expand on this. Actually, oh yeah, that format is fine. We're gonna be seeing cat, yes, like the animal. We're gonna be seeing um Vim or Nano, very, very simple. And I think, yeah, those are it. We'll be seeing those two, very simple. So cat just shows slash displays the content of a file. No, he's not going to bed. He's saying goodnight to Reggie. So this is cat, and we will see it in action. And Vim or Nano, two different commands. They are text editors within the command line interface. Why is this useful? This is very small. Okay, there we go. Let's say you are going into you're going into a resource. Now you have let me see which one I can do that's simple. Well, the same VIP. Let's say we're doing the VIP. Let's say you want to see the content of the manifest. You can just do cat file name. And as you can see here, you get the content. Fairly simple. Same thing in Windows. And why am I explaining this before Windows? Because if anybody was not on the last class, I explained that most of these commands will not be available in Windows by default. But thankfully, we can do it while at the same time we are installing Git, because Git allows you to install these extra commands on your command line. Just have a more let's say Linux oriented CLI that's very powerful. LS, listing everything, CD, moving, cat for seeing the contents, and finally Vim. If you guys don't have Vim, let me add this note. If you don't have Vim, do the following. Now, if this doesn't work for you, then in that case, I would recommend to Google for a specific Linux distro in case someone uses like something weird like CentOS or something like that. If you're using Debian, if you know what that is, this will work for you. Now, this is just an editor that you can modify code straight on the CLI. So, for example, Vim fxmanifest.lua. Now, I will not teach Vim, of course not. This is a lot of functionality, but Vim is very good to modify code without having a visual. So you're not a programmer that can only perform when someone gives you a monitor and gives you a Windows taskbar and you can navigate. No, they can give you um, even a cell phone. Even with a cell phone, you can connect to a server through SSH and through the terminal modify things. Yeah, it's horrible modifying on the phone. Trust me, but it'll save you if you're on a trip and you're on the beach and I don't know for whatever reason you have to change a single line of code. You can just go and do it simply with Vim. You go and modify your thing and you close it. I will not explain how to close it. If you want to use Vim or Nano, or if you're interested in this, now you know the terms to research. That's it for the CLI. Last thing will be Git. This is a link that I've left you guys in the documentation where you can download Git for macOS, Windows, or Linux and Unix. I already have it, so I'm gonna download it again just to show you guys really really quick how to get the extra tools. Um, you want to select, let me see. Yeah, you leave all this as default. There is something Vim, yeah, that Git decide for the branches. All this is default. And when you get here, let me actually, yeah. You cannot add. Yeah. Adjusting your path environment, you want to set it to use Git and optional Unix tools from the command prompt. The last one. This will allow you to, in a Windows, any Windows terminal that you open, you will be able to do ls, mv, cat, anything you want basically from those commands that I've showed you guys in here. Then now last, when that is installed, if you have a terminal open or a Visual Studio open, just completely close out of it and reopen so the command can be registered. Same as in FiveM when you do, let's say you have a script running and you suddenly registered a command, you have to restart it. So now you'll get your commands. Now going to GitHub, SQL is boring because you have to write. Actually, no. You know what? I disagree with you. It's not that I enjoy sitting down and writing SQL. But yeah, it can be boring. It's just talking English at the end of the day. But anything that's coding, I personally enjoy. I don't care if it's the most complicated language on earth. I'm gonna have fun, even if I want to kill myself, which is ironic, but it's just how I am. Well, moving forward with the last thing, GitHub. How do we use branches and merges with GitHub? So actually, I'ma just merges are more. I will leave merges as a bonus for the next class, which I don't think is going to be the cookbook any longer. Yeah, actually might be. Yeah, I have a couple of things I have to show you guys, like making an API and stuff, but I will just teach you the branches because in merges you do have to understand um what is conflicts, how you can prevent getting conflicts. Like conflict will be here you have one version of number 9, but then suddenly in red here you have another version of number 9 because you made a commit when your friend made something else, and it's just a big loop. So branches is just a less than a minute thing. You go to the repo you created. We already showcased how to do this. If you were not in the last class, you can either ask me, anybody else, or YouTube. It's something very simple. You click on the branch and you create another one. In this case, I'm going to create dev from main. This will just replicate the exact same thing I have on main, but on dev. Now, what does this mean? As long as we are in development, we will be pushing code to dev because main is the branch that goes into production. And if nobody has ever told you, or you haven't heard this before, you never, although I can guarantee that a lot of programmers will do this, um, and I have to admit I am guilty of doing this, but please do not do it as much as you can. You do not modify code directly in production. If you have a server, you do not modify code on the live actual files. You do not do that. Yes, I am very guilty because I just open a Visual Studio, I directly connect to the server and I change stuff. But mainly it's because most of the time, like, 90%, I know what I'm doing, but this is not something that is recommended. So for this, you create a branch dev just by typing in here whatever name you want. You create a branch. You upload your code to this branch, and once it's ready and approved and you know it's working, then and only then you can merge it with main. And merge is something that we will see on the next class along with pull requests, which just help you collaborate on code with other people. As they're created, they'll appear here, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Now let me go ahead and upload on the main branch because I don't want you guys to get lost trying to find dev. I will upload here two things. Number one, I said I was going to restructure this. So let's make a folder called lesson 3 because I don't want to be making a new repo for each code base that we write. So lesson 3 will include just an empty file just so we can create the folder. We commit that. We do not need that, and we are going to add a file. I hate having to do this. Okay, there we go. Upload file to lesson 3. Now, this file we are going to take it from lesson 3. Actually, let's just open this entire folder. And there you will have the README, which is everything we've talked about today, or at least the important stuff, the practical stuff, I'd say, because you also have to pay attention, right? We have our auto SQL. It'll just run whenever a resource starts and check if a table exists. Do not forget the homework. I'm pretty sure Kishi and I will do something about posting a reminder. So you do have the homework, which anyways, on the first line of the auto SQL file explains, instead of checking for one table, check for multiple tables. So say you have something like this. You have a SQL query that creates multiple tables. This will just make test table. It will just check, yeah, because when it executes this file, it'll execute this, not knowing if it exists or not, and possibly destroy it, create conflicts or something if you have drops and stuff like that. So yeah, homework, checking instead of one table for multiple tables, and still executing one file, so you do not have to touch the execute SQL unless, well, yeah, you actually do, yeah. Let me leave you another hint. Check for the SQL content using string slicing to only execute the table you want. Now, if this becomes too complicated, I will give you a small workaround that it's not the preferred way to do it, but I also don't want you to be stuck. If you want, you can ask, or you can do it this way. You can just make, actually, no, I won't even say that because that is not the way to do it. I would not even recommend it. um, so yeah, that is about it. You have all this in here. Let me actually re-upload the file now that it's been modified. You upload it here, and you have a SQL file which can be executed. This is lesson 3. We still have like probably one more lesson to go, building some more advanced stuff, such as using the FiveM API and building an outside API. Maybe even if a lot of people like it, we can go as far as connecting FiveM with Discord, but it's a big maybe. You have this, lesson 3, plus the other 2 cookbooks. Anything you need should be in there, guys. This is the end of our lesson 3. I hope you all enjoyed it. If anybody has any questions, now is definitely the time to ask them. Do not be shy. Thank you. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Any questions? You both have any questions? Any of you guys? No? Thank you, Kishi. Lovely. Yes. Questions? Let's see. You can even ask me like, how much is 2 plus 2, guys? Come on. Although I cannot guarantee I know the answer to that specific question, unfortunately. No, I'm just joking. Oh, okay. That would be a question for AI, something else, or for a marine biologist. Yes, please. Produces. Ah, it- Lua is a programming language. It is a programming language that is very good. Version check on scripts. To be honest with you, I have never done it before, but you can probably do so. Well, probably not. You can do so with GitHub and releases. But I've seen people do it by manually reading. I don't know how good that will be. Well, so I was saying I know that there are some people. I don't know if this is the best way to do it because honestly, I have never done version check on a Lua script before. Um, but I've seen people that they just parse the FX manifest and then from the version there you get it through the FX manifest. Like if it's 001 and but definitely as I said before, you there should be something that can map whether that version has a SQL change or not. I guess it's through GitHub. Oh, very nice. I'm going to read through this and see. Yeah, you see through the FX manifest. Load resource file. Yeah, the FX manifest. More than likely. With GitHub, well, oh, slash master slash version. Well, this is probably using releases because you know that, for example, Oxlib, let's see, with Oxlib, you get, instead of the source code, you get a release, version 3.30.5, for example. And I think this is what they use. Yeah, something like this. Yeah. And probably, just probably, you can parse this text and see, okay, SQL change and stuff like that. Like that? Yeah, there we go. Oof. Yeah, my. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? If I use a trigger client event in a server-sided file, can I still use the same trigger client side? So, I think I do not exactly understand what you mean, but trigger client event only works on server side to trigger client events. Trigger events only work across the same scope, so across client files only, trigger event, or across server files only. Now, if you're um, on a client side, you can use trigger server event to call the server. On resource start, if you add the resource name to avoid change the name like from QS housing to Alfie housing, have any problem on performance of server side or not? So here's the thing. Um, the reason why we use get resource name, especially I said I was going to explain this, but I forgot. Let me actually take this question to explain it. It is very simple. It is for a matter of security as well as consistency. So it just works. Suppose that for whatever reason, and yes, you can do this, you fetch this UI, you render it from another script. But this time you want to execute callbacks defined on that script instead of the script where this UI code is actually on. If you hard code it, when you try to do a callback on the current script that you're calling the NUI for, it will fail because it will be searching for it on whatever you hard coded here. So yeah, that is why we use get parent resource name. So no matter where you call this NUI, of course, you need to know if you're calling it from where you're calling it, the callback must exist. So let's see. This is asking for help. Since Kishi said you can ask everything, I will abuse. I asked something a while ago, but still not sure. What's your opinion on that? Since memory level scans are forbidden in FiveM, are we really stuck with just LUA, JavaScript for preventing injections and bypasses or client-side manipulation? Or is there a sneaky way around this? Well, so for uh, actually there is a thing, I don't know because I'm not going to speak about FiveM TOS or Rockstar TOS because I'm not familiar with it, but I know there's a big company out there that the way they bypass that restriction is by um they have a website that basically renders every player's current screen even if you have an all day pack, if you have no props pack, if you have gun tracers, kill effects, they can see those client side modifications. That is something manual that you would usually have a team. But then again, I am not recommending this because I do not know the legality of this. So moving forward, how can we get the player data from Qbox framework? Well, that is something very abstract. I do not use Qbox, but I'm pretty sure that you can just do Qbox get player, and there you have it. That is QB actually. It should actually be something like QB because Qbox is a lot like QB and yes, Qbox, I assume Qbox, you get the shared object, Qbox dot player data. That is the way you get it. Yeah, just like Cruz sent it. What is FiveM? FiveM is a modification framework for Grand Theft Auto 5, the game. Scripts is only in Lua. Oxley have better performance for most frameworks on market. Why? Scripts can not only be made on Lua, but it does depend what kind of framework you are using. So if you go into CFX Native's website, you can see that you will not only have natives for Lua, you have natives for something as ugly as unfortunately C sharp. You have raw natives, which is even crazier, and you have JavaScript natives. I do not recommend messing with the raw ones unless um, you're a very advanced in FiveM. Which is best for Windows? Which is best, Windows or Linux? Each has their own strengths and cons, pros and cons. I personally like Linux. It's just more performant than Windows itself. It's not running an entire desktop using. So even if you don't see it, just rendering a desktop and having apps open consumes RAM and processor and everything of the sort. If you get a Linux server, which is just a command line, it is literally it's like a motherboard that has no monitor. Nobody has a monitor connected to it. You just connect through the network and directly talk to your operating system through the command line interface, like the stuff I showcased. Yes, TypeScript, C sharp. Um, Technically, if you're even advanced enough, you can do it in probably in C++. You can do your own version of FiveM, but then again, that is crazy. Class to create anti-cheat. I actually wanted to do one like this because I've been working on an anti-cheat, but the problem with the anti-cheat is that it is not simple at all. It is very, I wouldn't say complicated, but it is complex and extensive because one of the things that makes an anti-cheat good is not, oh, it can detect God mode. Those things, anybody can do it. I mean, mine already does all the basic stuff. The problem is on two things. Number one, building a database of cheaters so that you can prevent them in the future. Whenever you start, you have nothing unless you dump somebody else's or somebody gives you access to their data. And the second thing is um how many I'd say vulnerabilities you can. Yeah, exactly. So you need a database. So um how you can prevent certain cheats and vulnerabilities, such as you need to have detection for Ulan menu, you need to have detection for that other menu that does whatever it is, event injection, event spoofing, client side injection. There's a lot of things that you could do. That is why one of the things that is recommended for, yeah, 5guard, I have never used it, but one of the things that is recommended when naming resources is not making obvious stuff like um give money. If you make an event like that and someone finds it and you don't have as well server side protection, then let me just tell you your server is cooked. They're just gonna give themselves a lot of money. Yeah, an anti-cheat, let me just give you guys for those that mentioned the anti-cheat, just take a quick look at the config of Finny. And I have no idea what it says the subscription expired. That should not be true, but I'll check. Look at all the config you can have. This is just crazy. Oh, 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 whoa. Hey, send me a link to that. So yeah, an anti-cheat is not simple. So I don't think we are gonna teach that. It is very long.
Kishi, come on, don't get me excited. You know why I know that's not true? Because Kishi is against anti-cheats.
What?
Yes, we do. Oh, it is? Oh, that is lovely.
I also thought that was fake until I saw that just now.
I know, right? Yeah. When I saw the second one, I was like, come on. Create a framework. Well, my man, that is something that is complex. But I know that there is one of our professors called Jack's Danger, one of our professors. You can watch a series on making your own framework. I cannot guarantee it's gonna be easy though, because it is not. Me personally, trust me, I would love to teach that kind of stuff. It's just too long and out of scope for the university right now, unless it's something very specific, like a group of advanced people. But those are you have to first learn to walk before you can run. And anti-cheat, it does take a lot of stuff. Um, for example, one of the things I was doing, let me actually see if this database is still. You need to know how to make an API as well, because guess what? You have to store information outside outside like a FiveM scope. You need to have an API just to handle information, players, store logs, and then render a UI. It cannot all be done inside FiveM. That is, if you want to allow, of course, a panel outside of FiveM. If you don't, then I don't know what kind of anti-cheat that is. Let me see what is the email address that I have, just to show you the amount of stuff that you will need to. Okay, this is definitely not it either. I have so many accounts. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. The class is over, guys, huh? Anybody can speak whenever you guys want. Let's wait for that thing. Oof. Well, it seems I'm going to. Never mind.